God, the doors are open. I don't know what's going to happen. Nothing that God doesn't want to happen is going to, everything he wants is going to happen, okay? So relax. We are going to do our official offering at the end. Yes, I'm changing everything today on you. Everything's going to change. Sorry. I'm just trying to be obedient. So we're going to keep the doors open during preaching, and we're going to have offering at the end. Because I don't know, sometimes I think people sort of get there in time after offering's done for a reason. So you're not going to get away with that no more. All right? So let's get on to it, because we've been here a while already. And I want to get this word out to you, and we can get to our offering, because we're actually going to do something different at the end at offering also. I know your brain can handle it. Let's go ahead and start with the slides, please. Give me my first slide. So New Year's Eve, this is actually the first time that I've spoken to the whole body this year. I wanted to bring up some things that Apostle brought on New Year's Eve. This was before he and Dr. Rick came up here and started talking. This was the prophetic word that Apostle gave particular to this body. If you have children, sorry, I forgot, you're dismissed for Children's Church. You guys been in here for everything today. That's good for you. It's good for you. So there was a prophetic word given by our apostle on New Year's Eve. And I'm not going to cover all of it again, but I need to bring some points out as it applies to what the Lord gave me to talk about today. Today's message or teaching is about power of voice. It's a royal declaration. I stole that from you, Dr. Rick, from Thursday night, the royal declaration part, but it fit perfect. Let's go on to the next slide. So, all these things Apostle spoke. The Spirit spoke through him to this body. First one, causing his voice to be heard. He's talking about God's voice in the world. He's causing his voice to be heard. Well, you think, well, I thought his voice was being heard. Well, that's one of those things that makes you think. Was it? Was God's voice really being heard? I'm sure it was some. But how much? How much was it just man, us doing what we always do out of tradition or ritual? Were we really hearing God's voice? But he's saying, God is saying he's going to cause his voice to be heard. That means there's not going to be an opportunity for it not to be. He's going to make it happen. Another one he said was he's going to be speaking in places not through religion. That's so difficult for us to grasp. Because we've been trained to think what we know as religion to be the only way God can speak. And we personalize it, and we almost sometimes think that God can only speak through us, meaning the church, the religious body. That's not true. God speaks to me in everything. I watch a movie, God speaks to me. I see stuff, it starts coming to me. Kanye West would not qualify prior as religion, would he? But God is speaking through him, isn't he? Yes. Sometimes we organized religion gets all bent out of shape because he didn't say the sinner's prayer right, or he didn't get baptized, or maybe he hadn't been taking communion. I don't know the man. But you know what? God will cause his voice to be heard. Next one, penetration into places church says is impossible. God will never speak there. He can never get through to those people. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Yes, he can. He can get through to anybody, but he needs mouthpieces. That's where we come in. Another thing, on New Year's Eve, the apostle prophesied to the church, not maybe just to KRM, but specifically to KRM and to the church as a whole, order to be pronounced in this country. I mean, God is going to say, I'm going to set an order down of how things are going to happen and how I'm going to do things. A lot of this prepares you to be listening. You know what to listen for, and you have a better chance of hearing it. Another one, recognize God's voice more clearly. This is probably one of the biggest things we struggle with. Is that God, or is it me? right? Just like today when we had our open time of communion. Some of you were sitting there thinking, well, is that God or is it me? Am I just making this up? I want to be sure. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to go and say something to somebody. And one of the biggest, when you get into the prophetic, you know what keeps us from operating in the prophetic? Everyone is not a prophet. Everyone does not have a prophetic gift, but everyone gets prophetic words. Sometime or another. You do. You know you do. The biggest thing that keeps us from giving them, number one, some people are afraid of getting up in front of people. You know that psychological survey said, you know what the number one fear in people is? Not dying, it's public speaking. Yeah, that's the number one fear. Some people would rather die than get up in front of people and talk. Now see, I don't understand that. Because I was just born this way. My mother once told my first grade teacher, after we had the big school play, I was in the first grade. First grade. I stood on a stage by myself in my cowboy outfit, and I sang a song. 1, 2, 3, look at me, I'm a happy cowboy. And my first grade teacher is playing the piano in front of the whole town. Because there's only one school, and everybody's there. I'm a first grader, and the piano teacher afterwards, my mother went up to her, and she goes, I don't know how he did that. The teacher goes, I was more nervous than he was. And my mother said, well, either he just doesn't get scared or he's too dumb to know he should be. I don't get the public speaking thing, but that's the number one thing. You know, but you got to, in this year, God has already said, you're going to hear God's voice more clearly. Man, that's good news. Right, at last. You know, but I have a lot of theories about why we say we don't hear God. Because a lot of the time, he's not saying what we want to hear. So we say we can't hear him when we know very well it's him, and he's telling me something I don't want to know or I don't want to do. People don't want to know, you know. The next one, reveal a different dimension of God's voice. I don't know what that one means. I can't tell you, okay? Be honest with you. That will still have to be revealed to me, but it sounds really good. A different dimension of God's voice? Huh? God, what are you talking about? It's okay to be like that. It's okay to say to God, I don't know. Me not know. Me not know. Me know nothing. The voice separates what is dead and alive. Ooh. Oh, but wait, there's a whole lot there. See, we could stop and teach on any of these all day, but we're not going to right now. So in other words, God is speaking to KRM and to the church. So there are things in KRM, believe it or not, and the church that are dead and things that are alive. Wow. We got some death. We got some dead stuff hanging around here. We need to separate it. It's got to go. If you listen to Dr. Rick's message from Thursday night, you need to knock it off. If there's dead stuff clinging to you, knock it off. Get rid of it. But his voice is going to do that this year. Why? Because the more baggage you get rid of, the more lean and mean you become for warfare, for battle, and for everything else. Because when you go like Samuel back here as a fighter, he's not going to go into his weight division 20 pounds overweight, or he's going to have a problem. Because the other guy is going to be cut down right where he needs to be. So he's going to run circles around him. So the voice is going to separate what is dead and alive, and a company of mouthpieces shall produce a sound. A company. My friends, this is you. You are not going to be able to sit by the sideline and watch these things happen. You are to be part of it. You are to participate. You are to use your voice. Now let's go to the next slide. So now let's really get into this. Curse of Oak Island. How many of you know the show? I love that show. So, real quick, we're talking about today the power of voice, and that equals sound. So, The Curse of Oak Island is a documentary reality show about these two brothers, Leganis brothers in Nova Scotia. They obviously owned this property, this island, and history says, even back in the 1600s, that treasure was built on this island, was hidden. And they built these big caverns called the Money Pit. And that's where the treasure is. We're talking about 90 to 100 feet deep underground. I don't know how the guys did it back in the 1600s, but we don't know how they built the pyramids either, but they did that. So they figured out a way. But they set all these booby traps. They set all these side tunnels that if you drilled to a certain place, the whole thing would fill up with water. So the curse of Oak Island is that, I don't have my numbers exactly right probably, but at least 6 people have died in the process of trying to find this treasure. And the curse says that the treasure will not be found until, is it 7? 7. So one more person has to die to find this treasure. Ooh, happy day. Yeah, I want to do that. So these two brothers, they're guys at least my age. So they've spent a large part of their life, they've invested in trying to find this treasure. And there's been guys before them. One of the guys, part of their team, recently died. He was old. There's been men who've spent everything they had their whole lives trying to find this treasure. I want to know, what do these two guys do for a living? Because let me tell you, I like the show because I get to see all the equipment, because, you know, I'm a construction equipment type guy. All these drill rigs, they wanted to drain the swamp and drill there, so they brought in this pontoon thing with this drill rig that was lightweight yet powerful that could sit on the pontoons and float around in the swamp and drill. I like that kind of stuff. But it's expensive. Where in the world are these guys getting this money, you know? So a side note from where I'm going with today is, obviously they have identified something that they want so bad that they'll give up everything to get it. That'll preach by itself. Are we willing? Do you have anything in your life that you would give up everything to acquire it? So, in the drilling process, they talk about, they had this drill. It's like 6 inches in diameter, and it's hollow. It's got teeth on the side, and of course it's twisting like a drill usually does. But it uses this sonar to send sound waves to help break up the rock. See, technology is a crazy thing, man. It uses sound waves, sonar. So, you've heard the word sonar. Sonar emits low-frequency sound waves to bounce off objects, submarine navigation. Did you know sonar can kill you? I didn't know that. I looked it up. Navy sonar operates at 235 decibel pressure, creating waves of pinging and metallic shrieking. It only takes 200 decibels of vibration can rupture your lungs. Above 210 can bore straight through your brain. Wow. That's cool, but it's scary, you know? Ultrasonic drilling and frequency drilling. So sound has that much power. Interesting. Next slide. Now, if you turn to Joshua 6, because that's where we're going today. I don't have scriptures on the board for you because it's a whole bunch of reading, which I'll probably do. If you remember when the children of Israel came upon Jericho, and God gave them the city. But what I'm wanting to do today, and the Spirit wants to do, is to show you their responsibility. Because this applies to us today in the use of our voice. We have a responsibility. If you start at Joshua 6, verse 1. It says, now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the sons of Israel. No one went out, no one came in. I'm reading from an NASB. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I've given Jericho into your hand with its king and the valiant warriors. And you shall march around the city, all the men of the war circling the city once. Ye shall do so for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day ye shall march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpet. And it shall be that when you make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up every man straight ahead. So Joshua the son of Nun came to the priests and said to them, Take up the ark of the covenant, let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark of the Lord. Then he said to the people, Go forward and march around the city, and let the armed men go on before the ark of the Lord. And it will come to pass that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard after the ark, while they continued to blow the trumpets. That's a lot. But do you notice it's very specific? If you're going to use your voice, you got to do it right. It's got to be according to what God said, exactly the way he said to give it. Why do you think sometimes we feel like our prayers, and I'm not talking about praying today. I'm talking about declaring a royal declaration with authority and power using your voice. But sometimes we do it, nothing happened. May not know what happened. What happened? Nothing happened. It's because God has very specific instructions. Everything has to be done in God's proper order. I know order comes across as a word that we don't like. Oh, now you're trying to control me. No, I'm trying to free you up. Because when you do things in order, you're doing things under a covering of authority, of spiritual authority. Honey, you can go out there on your own and try to do ministry with no covering, and you're going to come back like they did when they got whipped by the 7 sons of Sceva. Because you've got no covering. I appreciate covering. I'm not intimidated by covering. I'm happy to work under covering because guess what? I know Troy. Troy can be a wild animal sometimes and just do foolishness, and get way out of control. Ask my wife. You can't because she's not here today. Hallelujah. But you can see her next week and you can ask her. You can ask her about me, how I do things sometimes. I need that covering. There's an order to the way God does things. You notice when we had communion, God had us set a precedent, an order, a structure for everyone to work in. You knew what was expected of you. You had borders as you knew what you didn't need to do or didn't have to do. You had liberty to participate or not, whatever God told you to do. If you learn to work in structure, you have power. You don't have to be just out there doing your thing, And so notice they had the armed men went first. This is the order. God was specific about how they walk around this city. He doesn't walk, laissez-faire. That's my wife's word. Just laissez-faire, meaning like they don't care, they don't pay attention to what they're doing. Armed men go first. Then the priests with horns, which were shofars. We're not talking about brassy trumpets, Pastor Mary. Can we see your shofar? We happen to have a shofar in the house today. You heard it earlier. And we have an official shofar operator. Are you ready? Can you do it? This is the shofar. Yay! Woo! Yeah, that's enough. That's not easy, by the way, to do that, okay? She's very talented and she's worked hard on it. But there were 7 priests with these. You had the armed men, the priests, the ark of God, and then the rear guard. That's what you've got. That's the way God said do it. Next slide. Now, if you look at verse 10, we're going to move on here real quick. I'm just going to go to verse 10. It says, But Joshua commanded the people, saying, You shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I tell you, shout, then you shall shout. This is one of our biggest problems. We just run our prophetic mouth all the time when God is saying there's a right time for everything. Timing is everything in every part of life. You guys know this. But we seem to think that when we get filled with the Holy Ghost and we get empowered and we start feeling goosebumps and our hair starts standing up, hey, it's time for me to go. Not so fast. Where's that from? ESPN College Game Day. Yeah, college football. It's over. Anyway, I digress. So, he's specific as to when they shout. And until they shout, they're not supposed to say a word. You know, that's a precedent there. My dad was not a man of many words. He could have never done what I'm doing, okay? It wasn't that he couldn't talk. He just chose to only talk when he wanted to or felt he really had to. Now, it might have had something to do with being in the house with my mother and 3 sisters. Me and my dad didn't have a chance. I mean, it's a wonder I learned to talk at all. Because they were always talking. But he was a man of few words, so when he did say something, people listened. So God says, oh, at the right time. You will have your time. We get frustrated and we think, well, God, I'm not being used there. You know, I have all this in me. It needs to come out. And God is saying, there's going to be a time for you to shout. Because if you shout at the wrong time, then it doesn't give the corporate shout the power it needs. And we're going to see what that is. Look at verse, and let's see. Let me read down to it. It says, So he had the ark of the Lord taken around the city, circling it once. But they came into the camp and spent the night at the camp. Now Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. And the Lord went on continually and blew the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after them, while they continued to blow the trumpet. Thus the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this 6 days. You know, it's very hard because in verse 1 and 2, God promised them, I'm giving you the city. Yeah, they know it. They're walking around this thing thinking, God, why am I doing all this? Why am I having to keep walking around this stupid city when you've already said you're going to give it to us? Just give it to us already. We got no patience. There's things being worked into those people while they're walking around that city. And you don't know what it is. There's things being worked into you right now before God says for you to shout. Even though he's told you you're going to have a victory, you know what it is. He said, I still need you to do what I tell you to do. You know, what is the reward for obedience? Obedience. Obedience is its own reward. Obedience is its own reward. Don't need a carrot hanging out in front of me. He says unto them in verse 15, Then it came about on the 7th day that they rose up early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. And it came about at the 7th time, then the priest blew the trumpets. Joshua said to the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. So at the right time, all together, at one time, with one voice, they shouted. What did we read about the curse of Oak Island? Sound waves have power. Have you ever thought about this? I always thought that the shout was just, represented something, and that it was just an obedience thing. And God said, as soon as you shout at the right time all together, I'll knock the walls down. I don't think so anymore. I think the power in the physical of their voices of that many people hit the right low frequency and God used it to knock those walls down. That's in the physical. What do you think your voice has power to do in the spiritual? So much more. God is saying to us, I would rather you stop praying about it and speak to it. I'd rather you take authority over it because I've already given it to you and use the power in your voice and speak to that mountain. Remember that old song? I started singing it Thursday night. Somebody in here's heard this. I'm climbing up on the rough side of the mountain. Reverend Brown, I'm going to hang on to God. His powerful hand, I'm doing the best, make it through, or whatever. Reverend Brown, me not Reverend Brown, but not supposed to be climbing. I'm supposed to be speaking to the mountain so it moves. We got to stop that climber mentality and take the authority. They knocked down the wall of a city with their voice. How much more? How much more power? Let's go back to that other slide, please, because I'm almost done. If you think about it, God's promise was in verse 20. He made the promise in let's go to verse 20. We'll finish this up there. So the people shouted, and the priests blew the trumpets, and it came about when the people heard the sound of the trumpet that the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. There's one last point I want to make. They shouted. The walls came down, and they're done, right? No, my dear, they're not done. That says that they went in and took the city. You got to do more than shout. You got to put some feet on those words. And it comes down to that dirty little 4-letter word that nobody likes. You got to work. It's work. Living for God is work. I don't want to lie to you. It's physically easier to sit at home and do nothing and not care and be miserable. It is. It's easier to give in to misery. We all know this. I've done it. I've done it since I got saved. How you like that? I'm not just talking about the pre-Christ Troy. Troy, I did that right in the middle of my whole Christian experience. I took 3 years off. That's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this no more, God. I'm not going to church. I'm not preaching. I'm not teaching. I'm not going to play no drum. I'm not going to do anything. And I sat there by my lonesome at home by myself and was miserable. It was a choice I made. God didn't come down and make me behave. Shocker. But He never left me alone. He is so determined in His love for us. He just will not let you sit there like that. He is going to, the old-time Pentecostal preachers had a description for the Holy Ghost. They called Him the hound from heaven. He will hunt you like a hound dog. And He did. And finally, thank God, I came to my senses somewhat and turned around. So this thing that we're doing, this Christian experience, this KRM thing that we're doing is hard work, guys. You can get the word of the Lord. You can follow all the programs, the proper steps. You can be in order. You can do everything God tells you to do. You can shout. You can speak to it and all of that. And if you just stop there, that's right where you're going to stay. You're going to stand there around a city with broken walls and just looking at it and go, that's nice. That's a nice city. And God is saying, hello, let's go. Get in there. Get in there. Get in there and take the city. Just don't stand there and look at it. And your city can be a representation of anything in your life. It can be a family situation. It can be any situation. But that's what he's told us to do. Use your voice. Less time mourning. This man spoke Thursday night about us sitting around and mourning about this or that. And more time getting up, speaking, and doing. Your prayer time should be primarily listening. Yeah. I'm just going to tell you. I don't spend any time hard. I've not asked God to meet my needs, and I don't know how long. I don't have to. He's already said he'll do that. So why am I wasting voice on that? I thank him. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for the blessing. Thank you for the job. Sometimes I hate it, but thank you for the job. Your provision comes through my job most of the time. Usually with most people, that's the way it happens. So for some reason, he's never set a pot of gold on my doorstep yet. And I'm an Irishman. I'm looking for that Lucky Charms pot of gold. But I can't find it. It don't come. It comes from work. Again, it comes from work. So, KRM, you got to get ready to use your voice. Do I have another slide? I don't think I do. All right, good. Then I'm done. Happy day. Now, but we're not done. We're not done. We've got 2 more things to do. Real quick, before we do offering, and if you need an envelope, I'm going to have my ushers, you're back on duty. Go find your envelopes. I know we didn't do it yet. Hey, I told you we're doing things different. Real quick. Yes, you can. There's a microphone right there, sir.
You have a great voice.
Oh.
He can sing. How many of you think we ought to hear him sing more often?
They weren't supposed to know that.
It's out now.
Yeah.
But you know what came to me from the great teaching that you did this morning was you could have a great voice but sing the wrong song.
Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Thank you, Dr. Rick. Yeah, you got to get your instructions from God. So I'm going to run over announcements real quick. We're going to do our regular offering, which Pastor Art is going to initiate. He's got some things he wants to talk to you about. And before you leave, I know when I do this, I'm always supposed to be super fast. Okay. Before you leave, we're going to do something, one more thing different. I know you can handle it, okay? So announcements, Tuesday night, men's, women, and youth, 7 o'clock. Wednesday night is the beginning of our inner healing class taught by Pastor Terrell and Margie Rowland. This is they are using our facility. We've known these people. We love these people. It's not a KRM. We're doing the teaching. They're doing the teaching. So, but we support them. Friday, the false religions and cults class will be back at 7 p.m. Apostles teaching that. And if you go out here in the foyer, you'll find there's some of these little sheets that show you dates to remember that are coming up in the future for KRM, things that we're going to be doing, so you'll be able to see that. Pastor Art is going to come and speak to you briefly about the offering, and then after offering, I'll come back and do one more quick thing, okay?
I'm not sure that Pastor Art and briefly go together. I suspect it was more of a command than a hint. We're going through something together. It is about community, and that's what we spoke. accomplish what God is speaking to us as a whole. Yes or no? How many of you heard the voice of God when you closed your eyes this morning, okay, and you were given instruction? Listen to what God would say. How many of you, raise your hand, how many of you heard something from the Lord? Okay, that's over half. Now I'm going to say something to you that's going to require something from you. We've made a decision because God has spoken to us as leadership that we need to share in something that's going to cost us money. Money is a difficult thing to talk about. People don't want to hear about our need for money. But God has brought us together to share something, and that togetherness is going to draw us even tighter into the community that God is speaking. Giving is a joyful thing, but it can be painful. I don't get my sugar fix if I take it out of my pocket. As we are marching forward, taking a step forward, we need to understand that we have committed to each other, no matter what our circumstance is, that we're going to share in community with everything that God is speaking. I want to hear an amen. If that's the case, okay, and we have determined, okay, that there is a way that you can participate in what we're trying to do with our building. What we're saying to you is this: close your eyes, come on, and hear God. And I don't care what number God puts in your head. I want you to write it down on a piece of paper. Put it on a piece of paper. You don't even have to sign it. Give that piece of paper to Pastor Mary. We have to determine in a very short period of time what our commitment to our leaseholder is going to be. Can't lie about it. Can't ignore it. It exists. And we're going to share that together. Whether we're successful or not, we're going to share it together. So you are hearing something from the Lord. I don't care if it's $5 a month or $5,000 a month. I want you to write it on a piece of paper. As your pastor, a shepherd in this house that not only cares for but loves you as people, I want God's voice to be the primary thing that drives your decision making and causes you to commit to each other. To each other. So I ask you, I don't see any paper. I don't see anybody reaching for a notepad. Okay, but I'm going to tell you, you can write it on an offering envelope. You can write it on a tablet. Write something down and be a part of what God is saying to us.
Basically, what we're asking is you need to pray and get from God over and above your regular tithe and offering. What is God going to tell you to commit to on a monthly basis? Because our numbers, physical numbers of people have been down. Hence, the offering has been down. So we're like 7,500 behind right now. So your tithe and offering, this is separate from that. That's why we're asking you to designate a building. If you're going to give online, rent, well, but on the online, you don't have a thing for rent. You have a thing that says building fund. That's why I'm saying market building. So I'm trying to make it easy for you. You don't have to change anything. You can go on your KRM app or online, and you hit giving, and it has tithes and offering, guest speaker. It has all these different categories. It has the category of building fund. So if you put that extra each month in building fund, we'll know. I know you're saying, well, why you need to know the amount and this and that? It's because our landlord, the person we're leasing this building from, is not the owner. We have a sublease. We lease it actually from another church who used to be here, and they moved on to another building. So they actually pay to the owner directly, and we pay them. So what they have said is if you're in a bind and you don't have it at the first of the month, we're going to pay it. So it helps them figure their budget if the sooner they know what we're going to be able to give them. That's why the whole process. So that way, if we know what we can give them, they know what we're going to be short. But I really don't want to operate in that we're going to be short. I don't think we should be operating in that mentality. Because God is not short. It's just somewhere in this between Him and us, there's logistics that need to be worked out. You know what I'm saying? So other than that, we're going to do our offering the same as we always do. Everybody stand. You know we have a multitude of ways to give. You give online, you give with KRM, you hug a neck. And before you leave, if you're going to come and give, I'm going to do one more crazy thing today. Stay up here, because we're going to do something about this offering together. Okay? And even if you're not going to give, come up here. I want you to be a part of what we're going to do. So real quickly, let's come, put our offerings in the canisters here, and then we're going to make something happen.